Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant, bringing you part 4 of my series discussing the Borg vs. Cybermen contest. This part will cover the defensive capabilities of each faction. This is where things start getting really interesting because both factions are known for being all but indestructible in their own universes. Starting with ships once again, this again is a very lopsided comparison largely because of the total lack of information regarding the ships the Cybermen use beyond the fact that they exist. Do they have shields, impenetrable armor? Are they absurdly quick and nimble? No idea. The Borg, on the other hand, are simultaneously well documented, but also massively inconsistent. At the most basic level, Borg build massive ships that are capable of not only absorbing huge amounts of punishment, but also regenerate any non-catastrophic damage that they take over time, all on their own without needing any additional input. But in addition, they have crews of thousands of drones, which are capable of performing repairs and modifications as needed. This much is consistent throughout the shows. What isn't consistent is the Borg ship's ability to adapt to incoming damage. In the Best of Both Worlds two-part episode of Next Generation, not only was the Borg cube able to absorb huge amounts of punishment by the Federation fleet at Wolf 359 due to intelligence obtained by assimilating Captain Picard, the ship was actually able to completely negate and ignore anything and everything the Federation was able to throw at it. And this points to the single biggest defensive advantage of the Borg. They are infinitely adaptable. If they're exposed to a given danger enough, they'll become completely immune to that danger automatically. This requires those fighting them to utilize rotating shield frequencies and weapon frequencies, or both their defensive and offensive tools become totally worthless very quickly. The reason I said earlier that Borg ship defenses are inconsistent, however, is because their ability to totally negate damage in ship battles seems to be isolated to the Best of Both Worlds story arc. In later encounters, such as in First Contact, we get to see plenty of damage being inflicted on a different cube, though it's unclear if this is just because they don't adapt in that way anymore for some reason, or if the Federation just managed to figure out a workaround. In any case, the one thing that the Borg are incapable of adapting to is overwhelming force. If they don't survive the first hit against them, they can't adapt. This was demonstrated several times throughout the shows, but most clearly in the Borg war against Species 8472, where the Borg were just getting thrashed because the 8472 ships just one-shot cubes. On to the ground forces. For most of the history of the Cybermen, they've been incredibly resilient. At the most basic level, they're brains controlling armored robotic bodies, so conventional small arms weapons have little effect on them. In the Legacy series in particular, they're stated to be immune to all weapons with the exception of gold, which would interfere with their circuitry or something if they just touched it. The exception to this damage immunity was always overwhelming force. If you hit one with something like a rocket launcher, you'd be able to take it out, which was fine for individual Cybermen, but less useful against thousands of them. This was the case for most of Doctor Who. Then Nightmare in Silver came out and upped the ante pretty dramatically. In the far future era that it takes place in, Cybermen had learned a neat trick that allowed them to become immune to anything that damaged them in the past. In fact, in their war with humanity, this got to be such a huge problem that the standard solution to a Cyberman threat on a planet became nuke the planet. Give it up as lost and nuke the whole thing to stop even one Cyberman. In addition, this incarnation of Cybermen was also incredibly blindingly fast, and basically impossible to hit with anything when doing so. Another weakness of the Cybermen is the Cyber Controller, a super smart Cyberman who basically runs the show and if destroyed, basically just shuts down all the regular Cybermen in the area. As for the Borg, the standard Borg drone is armored and shielded with the signature Borg ability to adapt. This requires anyone fighting them to utilize rotating frequencies on their phasers or disruptors in order to take down any drone, and when grouped, this means that the Borg will probably lose a few units at first, but then all their units will quickly become immune to all energy weapons. A couple limitations on Borg adaptation are, as usual with the ships and in common with the Cybermen, overwhelming damage. If their ship is blown up, most, if not all drones on board will be destroyed as well. They also have a weakness to physical weapons. If you have the cojones to try to take one on in a fist fight, or like Worf to bring a sword to a fist fight, you can take out drones, and they apparently don't have the ability to adapt to such attacks particularly effectively, though they are also insanely strong, so if you get hit, you're pretty much done. Plus, up close and personal puts you in range of their nanotubes and potential assimilation, so buyer beware on the particular solution. As seen in First Contact, they also don't seem to have any particular resistance to holographic bullets, or presumably real bullets either. It's unclear if this is an actual limitation, or if the Borg simply hadn't encountered anybody who actually bothered to use physical bullets anymore. Presumably, if they were actually concerned about the threat that bullets pose, they just add extra armor to their drones. so I don't consider that particular shortcoming to be permanent. Another weakness of Borg drones is that they are cyborgs with exposed fleshy bits. So if you manage to do enough damage to those fleshy bits, you'll kill them, as Picard and Data do in First Contact again, by dumping a ton of warp plasma all over the Borg, which dissolved anything organic, killing off all the Borg in the area, including their queen. And there's another weakness of the Borg, that they have a single point of failure in their queen. If she goes down, the Borg are temporarily crippled, until they can establish a new queen. For a race of cybernetically enhanced, hive-minded beings, having a queen is really odd to me, but that's what the writers decided to go with, so whatever. Sci-fi in general really seems to like their single points of failure, don't they? Trade Federation battle droids, Borg, Cybermen, Locust aliens from Independence Day, Chitauri from Marvel, etc., etc. They all just, you kill that one thing and all of them just shut down. Whatever. It just means that each of these factions has a specific target to go for if you're ever fighting them, which is a pretty glaring weakness for both sides. Another weakness shared by both sides amounts to basically software exploits. In Best of Both Worlds, the Borg were defeated by implanting the command to sleep into their cube, which caused the whole thing to blow up for some reason. In Doctor Who, the Cybermen are rarely defeated via brute force methods. Usually the Doctor figures out some kind of or otherwise foils their plans, typically by defeating the cyber controller. Really, it's these defensive elements of both factions that made me want to do this comparison in the first place. Both factions are fundamentally similar, but their differences are what makes things really interesting. They have very similar weaknesses and strengths, and the parallels were just too close for me to not want to compare them. So that's all I have to say, but before I wrap up this video, I want to give a shout out to commenter at MM650 who reminded me of the existence of cybermats, which I really should have included in the weaponry section. I just forgot. Cybermats are slug-like devices made from a combination of mechanical components and typically some organic bits as well. They were used for infiltration and assassination, which they could accomplish by launching themselves at their target and injecting some kind of venom, which can rapidly kill its target. In Revenge of the Cybermen, the Doctor managed to disable and reprogram a Cybermat to attack Cybermen, so attacking friendlies, which it did quite effectively after having its venom swapped out for gold, which, again, was lethal to Cybermen at the time. Thank you to at MM650 for the reminder. In the meantime, what do you all think? Did I leave out some defensive element of either side that I shouldn't have? Am I over or understating the capabilities of either side? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.